I'd like to show you a game from round 6 of the US Championship. My coverage has started rather late because I've been away. I was actually at a very special chess event in Crete, and it was a pleasure to meet so many viewers of the channel there. I'll tell you more about that at the end of the video. So, US Championship 2022, very exciting event, really strong lineup with Fabiano Caruana, Wesley So, Levon Aronian, Lenny Dominguez, and yes, the enfant terrible of the chess scene, Hans Niemann, is also playing. And I'm going to show you this game from round 6 between Elshan Moradiabadi, originally from Iran, now representing the US, and Fabiano Caruana, originally from Brooklyn, and now representing the US. And this game is a really good lesson in Sicilian strategy, which of course always interests me. I always play the Sicilian with black, and played a lot of games on the white side as well. So Moradiabadi playing white, Fabiano Caruana playing black. Now, very often he answers e4 with e5, but clearly he wants to try and generate winning chances, get an exciting, dynamic position, so he goes for the Sicilian. Moradiabadi, well, probably one of the weaker players in the championship, but he has been much stronger. He's a very interesting guy, actually. I met him at the Olympiad a few years ago, and he's a fan of Sherlock Holmes, and he often plays with a hat. And he said, "The hat, that's my thinking hat. I like to get into the zone. That's how I can really concentrate." It's very nice. So this is the Taimanov variation of the Sicilian, which, well, Caruana has quite a lot of experience with, but Bishop f4, this is an unusual move, a little bit trendy at the moment, very direct. You're looking at a dart square here, so d6. And now previously, well, this has been a most popular continuation, then queen d2 and just castles queenside, very direct. But Elshan goes for bishop g3, so this avoids the tactic. Obviously, with the bishop standing on f4, then there's this fork with e5, so it just avoids that and keeps more tension in the position. And if black were to just bring a knight out, then white can exchange, and you can see that breaks up these pawns, and white just has the better structure there. So that's why Caruana played bishop e7 before knight f6. Bishop e2. So it looks like some kind of Scheveningen position with the pawns on the 6th rank. I mean, very normal Sicilian structure. But this bishop has found its way to g3 rather than going to e3. So it's a little bit unusual. Now one could play f4 here, but knight b3 puts a little bit of pressure here. And I don't quite see what's wrong with just playing queen c7 to protect that pawn. That looks completely normal. But Caruana played e5. Right. Now I can understand the position a lot better, because this kind of pawn structure is very much like, well, the Kalashnikov, the Sveshnikov, and the Najdorf, of course, with this backward d-pawn on d6. And actually, probably most like a Kalashnikov in this particular position, because the knight is on c6. In the Najdorf, the knight often comes to d7. So there are pros and cons of this move, playing e5. Black has staked a claim in the centre. Then again, you could argue that white has access to this d5 square, and I think that looks like the most normal move. And as said, we get a position which is very like a Kalashnikov. And I think, yeah, it's roughly level, you could say. But Moradiabadi plays a move which is, I suppose, strictly positionally correct. He wants to exchange off the light squared bishops, and he's hoping to get better control over the d5 square. But there is a drawback to this move, because after exchanging, Caruana played h5, hitting the queen and looking to chase down the bishop. And there's only one move which actually saves the bishop. If queen takes pawn, then bishop f6 traps the queen. No escape. If the queen comes back this way, then h4 traps the bishop. So there's only one way. Got to play queen h3, and after h4 you can see there isn't an immediate threat because the rook would be taken if black takes the bishop. But white has to be very careful here. So for example, if castles queenside, that's the move we'd like to play. This didn't happen. How would black win from this position? Black to play and win. There's your first question. I'll have a slurp of tea. Cheers. Well, the simplest way of winning in this position for black is to play queen c8. The idea is simply to exchange queens, and then you can take the bishop. So if white exchanges, now you can see the bishop has no escape. There's no pin. Bishop is trapped. No escape. Very clever move. Queen c8. Nice move. So that's why after h4, instead of castling queenside, f3 was played. So the bishop needs to escape. Now, black shouldn't be too casual here as well, because if the king can castle on this side of the board, bringing the rook into play, then white's position could be quite nice. That's quite an aggressive position. So Fabiano played bishop g5, and that prevents queenside castling. And if you're a Kalashnikov player, you will recognize this maneuver very well. Well, you also see it in the Najdorf, in the Sveshnikov, but it's especially common in the Kalashnikov. I call this the breakout bishop. So the bishop wasn't doing too much here, blocked in by its own pawns. But on bishop g5, it claims a really useful diagonal. And yes, there is a particular point here of preventing casting. So white has to go kingside. And with the pawn on h4, that's really what black wants. I mean, in a very kind of long-term sense, it could be that white's king could get a bit squashed on the king side. Now again, black has to be incredibly careful. The move we would like to play is just to bring this knight into the game. But then white would break with f4, and with the king still in the middle. Now, it could be very tricky indeed. You know, after this exchange, let's say white is ready to double on the f-file, and this pawn is obviously vulnerable. Yeah, don't like that. So Fabiano had to improvise at this point. He played rook h6. I mean, this is really unusual for the Sicilian. Very strange. Of course, after rook h6, black cannot castle kingside. But now, because the rook is protected, there is a threat to take the bishop, so the bishop drops back. Now knight f6, and you can see that white can't get in f4 very easily, so that's the whole point of this. So it's a really peculiar situation. This rook is very oddly placed on h6, but the queen, well, is it oddly placed on h3? A bit, yeah, although this diagonal looks quite nice. Rook d1. looking at the backward pawn, which I know some of you feel anxious about. For me, it's just another day at the office. It's no problem at all. Queen c7. Now this knight, so often the case in these Sicilian positions when there are pawns here, actually can't do very much. So Moradiabadi plays knight c1. Just trying to bring it to a better square. King f8, yeah, the king steps away. It's going to feel more secure behind these pawns. And now, this is a very instructive mistake actually. a3 is played. Knight e2 would have been much better. And that means, well, as we'll see, if a knight ever comes here in order to go into c4, then white can play b3 to prevent the knight coming here. And the point is that this knight protects the knight on c3. This knight on c3 is often a problem in Sicilian. It can be vulnerable, and if it ever moves, that pawn is vulnerable, as we're going to see. So that's the position. a3. Now knight a5. This is classic Sicilian strategy. Once that knight reaches c4, white is in massive trouble. So the threat is just to play knight takes pawn, undermining the knight's support. Well, okay, let's just demonstrate this. So here, king h1. Okay, it's a nothing move. Knight takes b2, and thank you very much. We've won a pawn for nothing and crashed through. So this is the problem. So white has a real dilemma in this position. You know, what do you play? What about moving this knight back? Okay, what about knight e2? Well, there's a problem, and now we can make use of this beautiful bishop on g5. Knight e3, supported by the bishop. Nice knight fork, and after that's taken, check, and queen takes pawn. That pawn is often the target for black in the Sicilian. So white already has difficulties here, big difficulties. If b3, that knight is vulnerable. Knight e3 again, and black picks up the knight. So white is struggling here. Knight b4 played. Okay, that's looking for compensation, looking to bring the knight to d5. And I suppose this is consistent with white's plan of exchanging off the light squared bishop, if you remember a long time ago, here. The problem is that this pawn is vulnerable. I mean, it's possible to take there straight away. I mean, you could say that white has a bit of compensation here. I would still feel very comfortable with black because, you know, these pawns are split. Black is a pawn up. Yeah, there's a nice knight on d5, but the pawns are split. Black must be better. But instead of taking, Fabiano played a very classy move. He just kept things really simple. He played queen c8, exchanging queens, and that just means his position is much simpler to play. Oh, incidentally, in this position, probably the most practical move for white is to play f4, just to stir things up as quickly as possible. Just giving up a pawn. It actually reminds me of the King's Gambit. And black should be better here, but it's very, very messy. This is a kind of irrational position that you don't really want to play. Things can go very easily wrong because it's a very unusual position. But after knight b4, this is a bit too smooth. Queen c8, very smooth. The endgame is still is excellent for black, and there are still enormous problems with these pawns here. Yeah, I mean, it's just very hard to hang on to all this particular structure and the placement of the knight on c3. Knight a4 played. Well, this doesn't really help because after a5, the knight is attacked. Again, there's problems with the knight coming into e3. So if knight d5, that's really where you want the knight, but then knight e3. Hits this, if that's taken, then rook takes c2. This is classic Sicilian strategy. You undermine the support of the knight on c3 and you attack the pawn on c2. So after a5, hitting the knight, went back to a2, knight e3. So we've already seen if that's taken, then black is just winning the pawn. And now the knight came back to c3. So just giving up in exchange. White has a little bit of compensation in that the knights on the queen side are a bit more secure, and there are some weak squares here. There's a little bit of pressure here, but even so, this must be good for black. Black is a rook for a knight ahead. I suppose one issue is that these rooks are split. I don't like split rooks. I like them to work together. However, this one is going to come into play, and black can actually use this space on the king side. So let's have a look. King g8. I'm not quite sure what that one's about. I mean, maybe Fabi had the idea to bring the rook back and in some positions play the king here. Maybe he just felt the king was a bit more secure on g8. In any case, rook g6. The rook coming into play here. He gives up a pawn, but now that allows the bishop to this excellent diagonal. Rook d3 and bishop d4. Bishop here. And again, Fabi manages to get some play on the queen side, and it's still connected with hammering down at that pawn on c2. So if knight takes b5, then rook takes c2, you can see black has broken through, and the rooks connect beautifully in that position. So bishop takes f6 played, g takes, knight d5, and now if black is too precious, if black gets worried about knight e7 with a family fork, then white would be doing pretty well. Once this knight gets back here, white would have compensation, but there's no need to worry about this. Rook takes c2, the rook breaks through. So Moradiabadi gets back his rook for a knight. But what's happened to the position? Well, rook and bishop are a beautiful combination of pieces. They work so well in an endgame. You can see the bishop will support the rook. The bishop is beautifully protected by the pawn, and this rook just runs amok on the second rank. Can just sweep up the pawns. And, well, what's the score now? Black is 2 pawns up. Yeah. I mean, it's utterly lost now. Let's just go swiftly to the end of the game. This isn't too difficult. And here, Moradiabadi resigned. Rook is attacked. Okay, what could possibly happen? Well, what about rook f1? Let's take another pawn. Okay, white can deliver a few checks, but it doesn't really matter. Let's take that one. So black will have these 2 passed pawns. White's pieces can't really defend against both of them. And crucially, everything is secure. Everything is protected. There's no danger at all. So one of those is bound to get through. I thought an excellent game from Caruana there. He really kept control beautifully. And I mean, this is a very unusual strategy with h5. And particularly, putting this rook on h6. But it worked out absolutely perfectly. Very nice game. So I was going to tell you about this event I've just been involved with. So this is an event held in Crete, beautiful 5-star hotel. It's organised by the Amateur Chess Organisation. They've been hosting events for amateur and senior players for over 10 years now. And basically these events combine a chess tournament and a holiday, chess and vacation, and it's a really friendly atmosphere, on and off the board. Players are in 7 rating groups, so you only play against a player of roughly your level. So it's not too strenuous, but you're guaranteed to get a good game. There's lots of events away from the main tournament. There are blitz tournaments. There are grandmaster lectures. I give lectures. There are 2 other grandmasters there also giving lectures as well. And we also analyze your games after you've played them in the tournament as well. So yeah, if you want to join in on this, then the next event is going to be held in April and May on the Greek island of Kos. Again, a beautiful 5-star hotel, lovely swimming pools. I'll be there again, so if you want to join in, do meet me there, and I'll go through your games. They're really, really well run events. I think there's room for 150 players. Many have booked already, so if you want to get in there, I'll put the link to the organisation's website in the description and in the comments section as well. So if you're interested in joining me there, I look forward to seeing you. Thanks a lot. Bye now.